Namo Ramana. A very warm welcome to all the devotees for Raman Kendra Delhi's Sunday Satsang. Mr. Narayanan is at the shrine and I shall request him now to initiate with puja. Sir.
Om Achyutaya Namaha, Om Anandaya Namaha, Om Govindaya Namaha. Lambarvaram Vishnum Shasivarnam Chaturбhujam Prasanna Vadanam Dhyaye Sarva Vignogo Upasanteye. Ayamurtha Samusha Dostindo Bando no Karnando Ayamurtha Samusha Dosto Tadeva Laganam Sadinam Tadeva Taravalam Chandravalam Tadeva Vidyavalam Devavalam Tadeva Lakshmi Budete Tegrim Swarami Om Om Suva Om Mahar Om Jana Om Tava Om Satyam Om Tatsodharvavaniam Bhargo Devasya Dhimehi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat Om Avajutusa Amritum Murmuswaram Namopata Samasta Durga Shatwara Ki Parnesa Pichetam Karishyamana Karmana Nirvighna Prasam Satam Ado Vignesa Pujam Karishye Prithviyam Nirtulsi Surandanda Varma Devada Prithvi Diya Trida Loga Detam Vishnuatada Kansatarimam Devivutram Gurusatanam Agamatam Tu Devanam Kamnatam Tu Rakshakam Khandaram Karam Yadam Devadavanalajanam Namapata Samasta Durga Shatwara Ki Parmeshu Pichetam Virvanda Siddhatam Ado Vignesa Pujam Karishye Ganananda Ganapati Gumavamaye Kavim Kavinamo Mastotramam Destarajam Brahmana Brahmanaspad Anusuna Kusita Sadhanam Asmin Dharitra Vinde Mahaganapatim Dhyayami Mahaganapatim Avamayami Om Mahaganapatim Asanam Samarpayami Om Mahaganapatim Argyam Samarpayami Om Mahaganapatim Padyam Samarpayami Om Mahaganapatim Asamaniyam Samarpayami Om Mahaganapatim Upasarikatanam Samarpayami Om Mahaganapatim Sananandram Asmaniyam Samarpayami Om Mahaganapatim Vastradatam Akshadam Samarpayami Om Mahaganapatie Namah Yignopadhidartam Akshatam Samarpayami Om Mahaganapatie Namah Gandha Dharayami Samarpayami Om Mahaganapatie Namah Gandhovali Akshatam Samarpayami Om Mahaganapatie Namah Sangaranatam Akshatam Samarpayami Om Mahaganapatie Namah Ritra Kungumam Samarpayami Om Mahaganapatie Namah Pushpai Pujayami Om Kundaya Namah Om Ekadandaya Namah Om Kapilaya Namah Om Gajagarnagaya Namah Om Lambodharaya Namah Om Vigdaya Namah Om Vighnarajaya Namah Om Vinayakaya Namah Om Dhumagedave Namah Om Ganatakshaya Namah Om Balachandraya Namah Om Gajaranaya Namah Om Vakrtundaya Namah Om Surpakarnaya Namah Om Erambaya Namah Om Skandavurdhavaya Namah Om Siddhavinayagare Namah Om Shankara Moksha Vinayagare Namah Om Atupura Vinayagare Namah Om Mahaganapatie Namah Nanavida Paramana Patra Pushpani Samarpayami Dhupartham समर्पयामि। दीपार्थं समर्पयामि। अक्षतां समर्पयामि। ओम भूर्भुवस्सुवः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात्। देवसवितुर्वरेण्यं सत्यं दर्शनं पतञ्जामि। अमृतस्वं स्वाहा। ओम प्राणाय स्वाहा। ओम अपानाय स्वाहा। ओम ज्ञानाय स्वाहा। ओम उदानाय स्वाहा। ओम समानाय स्वाहा। ओम ब्रह्मणे स्वाहा। महागणपतिये नमः। महागणपतिये नमः। महागणपतिये नमः। पुरगण्डनाट्यचक्रे नैवेद्यं समर्पयामि। मध्ये मध्ये पानीयं समर्पयामि। उत्तरावसं समर्पयामि। कर्पूरं समर्पयामि। नमो नमो गणेशाय नमस्ते विश्वरूपिणे निर्विघ्नं गुरुमे कार्यं नमामि गजानन अभिजानपद्मार्कं गजानन महार्निशम् अनेकदन्तं भक्तानाम् एकदन्तम् उपास्महे। महागणपतिये नमः। महागणपतिये नमः। महागणपतिये नमः। कर्पूरं समर्पयामि। नीराजनं समर्पयामि। नीराजनानन्तरम् आस्मनीयं समर्पयामि। वक्रतुण्डमहाकाय सूर्यकोटिसमप्रभ निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देव सर्वकार्येषु सर्वदा। गणपति प्रसादं सरसा प्रणमामि। ओम ओम सोम ओम जनवं तव ओम सत्यम ओम तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात्। ओम ज्योतिर्संभ्रमवत्सरम् मम पात्र समस्त दुर्ग चत्वारः श्री परमेश्वर प्रीत्यर्थं शुभे शोभने मुहूर्ते आद्य ब्रह्मण द्वितीय परार्थे श्रीवेदे वराहकल्पे वैवस्वत मन्वन्तरे अष्टाविंशतितमे कलियुगे द्विमे वादे जम्बूद्वीपे भारतवर्षे भरतखण्डे मेरो दक्षिणे पार्श्वे सगाप्ते अस्मिन् वर्तमाने व्यावावधिके प्रवादिनां षष्ठ्या संवत्सराणां मध्ये सोमकृतनाम संवत्सरे दक्षिणायने ग्रीष्म ऋतु खडगमासे शुक्लपक्षे षष्ठीतिथ्यां शुभतिथौ भानुवासरयुक्तायाम् उत्तरफल्गुनी नक्षत्रयुक्तायां शुभनक्षत्र शुभयोग शुभकर्ण एवं गुण विशेषण विशिष्टायाम् अस्यां षष्ठीतिथ्यां शुभतिथौ मम जन्मप्रति एतच्चनपर्यन्तं मध्ये सम्भाविधानं सर्वेषां भावानां सत्य अवलोकनार्थम् अस्माहं सहकुटुम्बानां क्षेमसद्धर्य वीर्य विजय आयुरारोग्य ऐश्वर्याणाम् अभिवृद्ध्यर्थं समस्तमङ्गलाभ्यर्थं समस्तदुर्दोषशान्त्यर्थं रमणमहर्षेः प्रसादेन ज्ञानवैराग्यसिद्ध्यर्थं श्रीरमणमहर्षेः पूजां करिष्ये। तदङ्गं कलशपूजां च करिष्ये। दिनेश्वरं यथास्थानं प्रतिष्ठापयामि। शोभनार्थे क्षेमाय पुनरागमनाय सह कलशस्य मुखे विष्णुकण्ठे रुद्रसमाजित मूले तत्त्वशुद्धो ब्रह्मा मातृगणे सम्प्रदा कुशोत्तुसागरः सर्वे शब्दसुभावसूत्रा ऋग्वेदो यजुर्वेदो सामवेदप्राकरण गङ्गे सत्यग्न सबने गोदावरी सरस्वती नर्मदे सिन्धु कावेरी जलेस्मिन् सन्निधं कुरु अंगैः सहिता सर्वे कलशाम्बु समाचरिता आयान्त धैर्यपूजार्थं दुर्धक्षकारः। शंभूरा सागरोत्पन्नो विष्णुकरे देवे सम्पूजिते नमोस्तुते देवो देवाय प्रोक्तो जीव देव स्नान अंजान निर्माल्यं स्वयं मौर्य पूजयेत्। ओम सकलगुणात्मक शक्तियुक्ताय योग विलात्मने नमः। आधार शक्तिये नमः। मूल प्रकृतिये नमः। आदिवराय नमः। आदिकुर्माय नमः। अनंताय नमः पृथ्व्यै नमः आदित्यादि नवग्रह देवताभ्यो नमः दशदिग्बालेभ्यो नमः गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरा गुरु साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः ओम अस्य श्री प्राणनिष्ठामन्त्रस्य ब्रह्मा विष्णु महेश्वरा ऋषिरिगति सामधर्माणि नन्दांसि सकल जगत सृष्टि सम्मार्गारिणी प्राणशक्ति परादेवता आम बीजम हरिम शक्ति रोम कीलकम प्राणप्रतिष्ठापने विनियोग आम अंगुष्ठाभ्यां नमः हरिंदर्दिनीभ्यां नमः रोम मध्यमाभ्यां नमः आम अनाभिभ्यां नमः हरिंगर्तिकाभ्यां नमः रोम करलपुष्ठाभ्यां नमः आम हृदयाय नमः हरिं सुसेसा रोम कसाय वसन् आम कौसायम हरिं नेत्रदाय वसन् रोम अस्त्रदाय पट पूर्वोत्सर्ग दिग्बंध ज्ञानम रक्तांबोधिस्त बोधोरस तरुण कराचे पासंदोदंड मिक्षुत्व मणिमण पंचबाणा विप्राणसु कवालंतने ददापि नवसोरटिया देवी वाला रोना बहुसुगरी प्राणशक्ति परान ओम आम हरिं क्रोम क्रोम हरिं माम हम यम रम लम वम सम सम्म हम सोहम सोहम हम स अस्यामूर्तो दिवदृष्टदो अस्यामूर्तो सर्वेन्द्रियाणि वाङ्मनस सत्सूत्र दिव्या प्राणवा पाणिपाद वायुपुष्टानि या कस्ति स्वस्ति सुखं सुरं दृष्टन्तु स्वाहा ओमस्य श्रीप्राणनिष्ठामन्त्रस्य ब्रह्मा विष्णु महेश्वरा ऋषिरिगति सामधर्माणि नन्दांसि सकल जगत सृष्टि सम्मार्गाणि प्राणशक्ति परादेवता आम बीजम हरिं शक्ति लोम कीलकम प्राणप्रतिष्ठापने विनियोग आम अंगुष्ठाभ्यां नमः हरिंद्रदेवीभ्यां नमः लोम मध्यमाभ्यां नमः आम अनाभ्यां नमः हरिंगर्तिकाभ्यां नमः लोम कर्णपुष्ठाभ्यां नमः आम हृदयाय नमः हरिं शिरसे स्वाहा लोम श्रियाय आम कौसायम हरिं नेत्रदाय रोम अस्त्रदाय पट पूर्वोत्सर्ग दिग्बंध असुनेदे पुनरस्मार्थ सक्ष पुनप्राणनी नोइदे भोगम दोपस्य में सूर्य मचंद ममदे मणियाशक्ति आभाइदो भव श्रद्धाविदो भव सन्निधो भव सन्निधो भव अवगुलितो भव सुब्रतो भव सुप्रसन्नो भव सुमुखो भव वरदो भव प्रसिद्ध प्रसिद्ध स्वामी सर्वजगन्नाथ यावत् पूजावसानकं तावत् दुःखकृत्वावेन बिम्बेऽस्मिन् सन्निधं कुरु ईश्वरा ओम भूर्भुवस्वः स्वधर्मवर्ण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात् देवदेवस्य तन्नो स्वाहा ओम प्राणे स्वाहा वाणे स्वाहा ओम ध्याने स्वाहा उदारे स्वाहा ओम समाने स्वाहा ब्रह्मणे स्वाहा नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल रमणाय नमः नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल रमणाय नमः नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल रमणाय नमः सुब्रह्मण्य स्वामीनाथन दक्षिणामूर्ति नमः राजा भैरवानंदी महेश्वरा शिव पार्वती नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय प्रगंड गोसीरम निविद्यं समर्पयामि मध्ये मध्ये पानीयं समर्पयामि दूतसूत्रावसं समर्पयामि नीराजनं समर्पयामि नीराजनानन्तरम् आसमनीयं समर्पयामि भगवान रमण स्तोत्र गुरु ब्रह्मा गुरु विष्णु गुरुदेवो महेश्वरा गुरु साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः अपार भक्ति सुकुमारी राशोर्यशोर्मि मात्रं भुवनं समस्तं न इदं तं रमणं कबीरं विद्याविनमृति चिन्तयामि ओम महातेन महोतेन जाताय नमः ओम श्री रमणाय नमः ओम गुरवे नमः ओम अखंड संविदाकराय नमः ओम अहुजसे नमः ओम कारणोद्भवाय नमः ओम जगत इदावताराय नमः ओम श्री भूमिनाथात लोचिकाय नमः ओम पराशर कुलोतमसाय नमः ओम सुंदरातलोत्पलाय नमः ओम कमनीय सुचारुराय नमः ओम शयाय शयायते नमः ओम शोणासुर महोदीन मानसाय नमः। ओम स्वर्णचकाय नमः। ओम श्रीमद्वादशान्तमात्रे भक्तविद्योदयाय नमः। ओम महाशक्तिनिवादेन प्रबुद्धाय नमः। ओम परमात्मदे नमः। ओम दिव्याय नमः। ओम पितृपदान्वेषिणे नमः। ओम इंदुमोनिना पितृमदे नमः। ओम पितृराजेत्त सोणसहितं प्राप्ताय नमः। ओम तपोमयाय नमः। ओम उदासीनाय नमः। ओम महायोगिने नमः। ओम महोत्साहाय नमः। ओम कुशाग्रतीये नमः। ओम शांत संकल्प संप्रभाय नमः। ओम सुसिंधुसे नमः। ओम सवित्रे नमः। ओम स्थिराय नमः। ओम तपस्वीत सर्वंगाय नमः। ओम गुलामुज विलोचनाय नमः। ओम चंद्रिका सुदासती मंडितानन मंडलाय नमः। ओम सूर्यवाक्यं समासीनाय नमः। ओम सूर्यदाख्य विप्रमाय नमः। ओम वेद वेदांत तत्वज्ञाय नमः। ओम चिन्मुद्रणे नमः। ओम त्रिगुणाधिकाय नमः। ओम विरूपाक्ष गुहावासाय नमः। ओम विराजसराकृतिये नमः। ओम चित्तनयनाय नमः। ओम पूर्णाय नमः। ओम रसदासतांडवाय नमः। ओम गंभीराय नमः। ओम परमाचार्याय नमः। ओम सुब्रह्मण्याय नमः। ओम अव्यप्रदाय नमः। ओम दक्षिणासीनाय नमः। ओम धीराय नमः। ओम दक्षिणाभिमुखाय नमः। ओम स्वराजे नमः। ओम महर्षिये नमः। ओम भगवते नमः। ओम ईक्याय नमः। ओम भूम विद्या विशारदाय नमः। ओम विमलाय नमः। ओम दीर्घदर्शने नमः। ओम आप्ताय नमः। ओम रुजमार्ग प्रदर्शकाय नमः। ओम समत्रुसे नमः। ओम सत्यत्रुसे नमः। ओम सत्याय नमः। ओम प्रसादाय नमः। ओम अमित विक्रमाय नमः। ओम सुकुमाराय नमः। ओम सदानंदाय नमः। ओम मृदुभाषिणे नमः। ओम दयार्णवाय नमः। ओम श्री सोनासुर युगूल स्कंदाश्रम निकेतनाय नमः। ओम सद्दर्शनोपदेष्टरे नमः। ओम सद्भक्त वृंद परिपूजाय नमः। ओम गणेश मुनि प्रियन सेवितां कृष्णोरुवाय नमः। ओम गीतोपदेश सारादि ग्रंथ संचिन्न संशयाय नमः। ओम वर्णाश्रम मदादीदाय नमः। ओम रसज्ञाय नमः। ओम सौम्याय नमः। ओम आत्मवदे नमः। ओम सर्वावनिमस्तानां आराध्याय नमः। ओम सर्वसद्गुणे नमः। ओम आत्मारामाय नमः। ओम महाभागाय नमः। ओम मातृमुक्ति विदायकाय नमः। ओम विनदाय नमः। ओम विनुदाय नमः। ओम विप्राय नमः। ओम मुनीन्द्राय नमः। ओम भावगोज्वलाय नमः। ओम दर्शनादिक संवारणे नमः। ओम मौनेन स्वत्वबोधकाय नमः। ओम निर्चान्दिकर्षादित्याय नमः। ओम स्प्रणाद्बन्धमोचकाय नमः। ओम अंधस्मेरचण्डांशुवे नमः। ओम संसारान्वतारकाय नमः। ओम सोनादुष्टरे नमः। ओम अर्थविद्याप्रकाशकाय नमः। ओम अविच्युतनिजप्रज्ञाय नमः। ओम नैसर्गिकमहात्मसे नमः। ओम कमण्डलधराय नमः। ओम सुब्रगवीरवसनाय नमः। ओम गुहाय नमः। ओम दंडवाणीये नमः। ओम कृपापूर्णाय नमः। ओम पौरवपिशक्वराय नमः। ओम स्कंदाय नमः। ओम देवदमाय नमः। ओम अमर्तयाय नमः। ओम सेनानिये नमः। ओम पुरुषोत्तमाय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः। नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः। नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः। विक्रादने नमः। अत्याय मुर्गावल्ली देवाने नमः। सुब्रह्मण्याय नमः। स्वामिनाथने नमः। दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। भैरवरे नमः। नंदीश्वराय नमः। शिव पार्वतीये नमः। ओम नमः शिवाय नमः। नमः शिवाय नमः। ओम नमः शिवाय नमः। नमः शिवाय नमः। ओम 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 शिवाय नमः। Let us all chant Upadesha Saram. Tasturagyaya Gapade Palam कर्मगिम्बरं कर्मसज्जनं कृतिमहततो वदनकारणं फलमसास्वदं गदनिरोधकम् ईश्वरार्पितं नेच्छया कृतं सिद्धसोदरं मुक्तिसाधकं कायवाङ्मन कार्यमुद्गमं भूजनं जव इन्धनं क्रमा जगतैसरी युद्धसेवनम् अष्टमूर्तिभृ देवपूजनम् उत्तमस्तव उच्चमन्दर सिद्धजं जप ज्ञानमुत्तमम् आद्यतारया श्रोदशासमम् सरलचिन्तनम् विरलतपरम् वेदभावना सौममित्यसा भावना पिता भावनीमदा भावशून्यत भावसुस्तुति भावना बला भक्तिरुत्तमा तिरुस्तरे मन स्वस्थता क्रिया भक्तियोगभो दाचनिष्ठितम् वायुरोदना दीयते मन जालभक्षिव रोदसाधनम् सिद्धवायव सिक्रियायुधा सागयोर्द्वयी शक्तिमूलका लयविनाशने उभयरोदने लयकदम्बुन भवति नो मृदम् प्राणवन्दना लीनमानसम् एकचिन्तना नासमेत्यद अष्टमो कृष्णयोगिन कृत्यमस्ति किं स्वस्तिनं यद दृश्यवारितं सिद्धमात्मन चित्वदर्शनं तत्त्वदर्शनं मानसं दुहिं मार्गणे हृदे नैव मानसं मार्गार्धवा वृद्धयस्त्वं वृद्धिमाश्रिता वृद्धयो मनो विद्यहं मन अहमयं कुतो भवति चिनवद ऐपदत्यहं निजविसारणम् अहमिनाशवा तमहं दया स्फुरतीरस्वयं परमपूर्णस इदमहं वदा अविख्यमन्वहम् अहमिदीनके तल्यसत्तया विक्रयेन्द्रिय प्राणतीतम नामसे कद दच्चडं वैस सत्त्वभासिका चित्ववेदना श्रद्धयायिति सिद्धयायहम् ईसजीवयो वेषदीपिता सस्वभावतो वस्तु केवलम् ईशानद स्वात्मदर्शनम् ईशदर्शनम् स्वात्मरूपद आत्मसंस्थिति स्वात्मदर्शनम् आत्मनिर्भया आत्मनिष्ठता ज्ञानवर्जिता अज्ञानहीनचित् ज्ञानमस्ति किं ज्ञातुमन्दरम् किं न सुपर्णि आत्मदर्शने अव्यया भवा पूर्णशिशुगम् अन्धमुक्त्यदिं तम्बरं सुगम् विन्दतीयजी वस्तुदैविक अहमवेदकं निजविमानकं महतितं तवो रमणवागियं महतितं तवो रमणवागियं महतितं तवो रमणवागियम्.
Namo Ramana. A very warm welcome to all the devotees for Raman Kendra Delhi's Sunday Satsang with Raghav ji. Before I introduce, and he needs no introduction, just a quick reminder to all the devotees for the message that was sent out last week. President of Ramanashram, Dr. Anand Ramanan, has been invited to talk about Bhagwan's teachings and his legacy in the building of the nation. This talk will be held at Prime Minister's Museum and Library in Delhi on 4th of August at 3 p.m. in the seminar hall. Devotees are welcome to attend. Those of us who may wish to attend, kindly get your name registered at either the Kendra office to Mr. Narayanan or Mr. Rajesh, or you can drop me an email at secretary@ramanakendradelhi.org. Thank you. Now, quickly coming back to our satsang, Raghav ji shall be speaking to us on the earliest set of instructions given by Bhagavan in his own handwriting, condensed in the form of Vichara Sangra or self-enquiry, as preserved by Gambhiran Seshaya. This consists of a series of questions posed by the devotee between 1900 to 1902 and handwritten answers by Bhagavan. The topics include both the core practice of self-inquiry as well as practices supportive or helpful for self-inquiry. Raghavji, who has been guiding us for over 2.5 years now, shall be addressing us on this as he has been doing for the last few months. Sir, I shall request you to now please take over and guide us. Namo Ramana. Sir, you are on mute.
ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। वन्दे श्रीरमणर्षेः आचार्यस्य पदाब्जं यो मे दर्शयदीशं भान्तं ध्वान्तमतीत्य। Welcome to one more study session of self-inquiry. Bhagavan's replies to Sri Gambhiram Seshaya's 40 questions. So just to give you a brief recap of what we had studied in the previous session, Gambhiram Seshaya has asked questions from a varied perspective, not just dealing with just meditation per se, but also with much of the traditional framework of what is known as Vedanta. And so there is a certain completeness to these questions, and the answers too are fairly deep and at times technical, but very incisive and insightful. In the previous question, Bhagavan had taught the method of Drik Drishya Viveka, how one discerns the Sakshi, the witness consciousness, from that which is witnessed. And the devotee there asks, how can we say that the mind and the senses, which seem to be perceivers, which seem to be endowed, as it were, with consciousness, how we can say that even they are just objects? And so Bhagavan there teaches the very important, well-known traditional method of discerning that even the mind is an object. When we think of the word object, we are inclined to view that which is external, very evidently external, such as a pot or a tree, as an object. But Bhagavan has given the prakriya, the method whereby we gradually draw in our attention from something that is very obviously external, like a pot or a tree, to something that is relatively more inward, more pratyang as it's called. So compared to the tree, which is evidently outside, the Indriya Golakas, which are the physical sense organs present on each one of us, our physical bodies, can be called closer to what we define as oneself. And yet, even the Indriya Golakas, which are the physical organs, including the retina and the optic nerve and all of that, even that is external to the very power of perception. So how do we know, for example, that the eyelids are closed or open? Or for that matter, whether even I am actually seeing or I am not seeing. And so there is this power to even perceive that very golaka, to become aware of the very existence of the physical organ. We possess that power. And so Bhagavan gradually draws our attention to that power of perception called the Indriya, the sense organ. Remember that in much of the spiritual literature, the word Indriya, or the sense organ as it's called in English, refers to the subtle power of perception. It doesn't actually refer to the physical sense organ or the anatomical structures which are studied by modern science. So remember the word Indriya or Jnanendriya, the cognitive organ of perception. All of that refers to the subtle power, which is part of what is known as the subtle body, the Sukshma Sharira. So whenever you happen to come across this word or you read any book, remember the word Indriya refers to the subtle body, not to the gross body. You cannot actually dissect the Indriyas, but you become aware of the Indriyas, your power of perception. And so to come back to this gradual drawing in of one's attention from the pot to the physical organ, to the subtle power of perception. And then even further, Bhagavan draws our attention to the mind, which gets joined to each of these senses of perception, and then we get information from that sense of perception. In other words, you have these 5 powers of perception. But at any given point of time, your mind is joined to one or the other of these indriyas. And that particular indriya alone is really giving you the experience, the vritti at that point. So this is what they call the conjoining of the mind with one particular sense organ. They say that the primary function of the manas is to join with one or the other of these 5 senses of perception. Of course, the mind can keep switching, keep alternating sometimes. And so you can get, as it were, simultaneously different informations or different data from these different sense organs. So remember, the mind is that which pays attention to one or the other of the senses. And you can see this very, let's say, distinctly when you're totally, let's say, engrossed in some music you're hearing. Then you might not notice what is actually in front of your eyes. In other words, your mind has got absorbed, joined as it were, with a certain absorption in the Shrotrendriya, the ear, the power of hearing. And when that happens, you are unaware of the details of what is in front of you. Or it could be vice versa. You're so absorbed in some object in front of you that you don't actually hear something in the background. Perhaps even your name being called out. is not heard by you, because your mind was joined to the organ of perception, organ of sight. And then you ignore the organ of hearing. And so therefore, whatever sense organ the mind is joined to, that sense organ gives you the experience. Which means the mind is even more pratyang. Pratyang means more inner. In Tamil, there's this word parak. Parak means be alert outwardly. Sometimes this word is used to alert citizens when the king is walking down a street, apparently. So there would be the usher, somebody who is ushering the king around the village with his standard, like a standard bearer. He'll keep saying parak, parak to the villagers and the country folk. Make way, be alert, look out, look out. So the opposite of the word parag is pratyang. Pratyang means inner, go inner. So that's the opposite message here, where Bhagavan shifts our attention gradually from the outer objects through the senses to the mind, which is the common factor which joins to each one of these senses. And then even further, Bhagavan leads us to the very Sakshi Chaitanya, the witness, which he takes us in 2 steps, saying, first you have the individual awareness of I, and then you have that very I recognized as infinite, recognized as not limited in any way. But before that, you first recognize I am not the mind. That is a very big, if you like, milestone in a person's spiritual journey. To recognize I am not the mind. You can more precisely put it, I am not just the mind. Because we come around at the very end and recognize that all that is negated as not I, is eventually validated as not separate from that very I. But that is to get ahead of the story. So first, you negate that I am not just the mind. I am that which is shining through the mind, that which notices the changes in the mind, that which owns up all that the mind has been subjected to, all that the mind has gone through. I was very alert yesterday and fresh, and today perhaps I am a bit tired mentally, I feel sleepy. So all of these are different states of mind or avasthas which are recognized by the Chaitanyam, the individual awareness. And so the more we take our stand in that Sakshi, which is even more pratyang or inner to the mind, the more we are free of the vagaries of the mind. And so that journey was what was summarized by Bhagavan, saying that you have the outer organ, and then the physical, the sense of sight, then the mind, then the individual soul, that's the awareness which is aware of the changes in your mind. You can say it is the kutastha, which means your individual sense of awareness, which notices the changes in your mind, in your mood, and recollects that I had these experiences yesterday. So all of that is not just the mind, because it has to be there has to be a connecting continuity between the different changes of the mind. That presupposes that individual locus or entity called the awareness, which is conditioned by the individual person, which Bhagavan says is the individual soul. And then that individual soul is recognized by the Guru's Upadesha and by owning it up through self-inquiry as infinite, partless. So once you recognize that I am not the mind, then what is that I? And that I is Ananta, which is free of any of the limitations all of limitations belong to the objects. And so that last step is what really Bhagavan refers to in self-inquiry, recognizing that I'm not just the mind. And the second and last step, that I resolve being myself. I just abide as the self. That second part is referred to here as consciousness or the self, Bhagavan says, in answer to the 15th question given by Sri Gambhiram Seshaya. So, to paraphrase or to reiterate what Bhagavan says, summarizing this very idea, he says, the consciousness which knows all objects is said to be the Drik. Drik means the seer, which is the ultimate knower of even the mind. And then Bhagavan goes on to say, we are not known by anything else. If someone were to say, okay, fine, I know the mind, I know what is happening in my mind and all that, but is there a knower which is even further, knowing that consciousness? The answer is no. That leads to what is known as infinite regress, anavastha dosha. So Bhagavan says that we are not known by anything else. There's no other knower. And so we are said to be the knower only in relation to the objects, including the mind. So if you ask, what am I? I'm not even the knower, says Bhagavan. Only when there's an object to be known, I assume the role of a knower. So see how Bhagavan is making us more and more subtle in our paying attention to what you are already experiencing. In a way, Bhagavan emphasizes that you're not actually looking for some magical new experience of the self. Instead, you're paying attention to what already is, which is that you are the Sakshi, the witness. And then Bhagavan says that Sakshi is not known by anything else. And therefore, even that Sakshi's knowership, as it were, is only in relation to what is presented before it. So when there is an object before you, be it the mind, be it an external object, you become a knower. And by yourself, you are not even a knower. You are pure awareness, which is free of any roles of even knowing, says Bhagavan. So only in relation to some known object, we are said to be the knower. Otherwise, in truth, what is known is really not even apart from us, says Bhagavan. So this is the most really important statement here, that what is known, what is apart from us, is not actually there really. It is non-existent apart from oneself. So that is the last stage in this very journey. So in this journey, like I said, you come from external objects, gradually drawing the mind to the senses, the sense of perception, and then the mind, and then you are the knower of the mind. And that knower of the mind is not even a knower. It is Advaitam, it is Shuddha Chaitanyam, pure consciousness, says Bhagavan, which is not even inherently a knower. We only use the word knower to draw our attention to that which is in and through all your experiences. And then Bhagavan gives the example of the iron ball, saying that this ahankara, which is your I sense, is inseparable from the pure consciousness. So whenever you think of yourself, you're thinking, without knowing it, of two entities mixed up, which are consciousness and the mind, which is inert by itself. The conglomerate, this granthi, is known as the ahankara really. There's an inert entity and there is consciousness. Both of these mixed up give rise to the ahankara. And so Bhagavan goes on to say that this egoity is the English word, traditional older English word for ahankara. Even as the egoity arises, it appears superimposed on the nature of the self, like the heated iron ball. So in a heated iron ball, you cannot at that point separate the heat and the iron ball. the iron ball in a blacksmith's shop is luminous in a way where you cannot separate the heat from the iron ball. They are different in your understanding, at the same time inseparable in your experience. And so here the ahankara, even as it arises, appears superimposed on the nature of the self. So the way you understand is to say that the ahankara is equal to chaitanya, formless consciousness, plus inert mind. So that is the simple equation there. Chaitanya, formless consciousness, plus inert mind is equal to ahankara. And it is a very incongruous mixture. If we shine the light of observation, inquiry, it appears to be unmixable. Consciousness can never mix with matter, and yet that is the experience at the present moment. So we are very honest. We start with where we are. We don't try to say, yes, I am consciousness, so I don't care about the mind. I don't care about the body. So this confusion can sometimes kick in due to prematurely taking on this standpoint of Atman or consciousness. So Bhagavan encourages us in various direct and indirect ways. Be honest. Wherever we are, we move from there to a more true and more subtle understanding. And so when we say ahankara, there is a mix-up between I, consciousness, and mind, which is this inert entity, which is made up really out of the food we eat. The very food we eat gets transformed over the years into this entity called mind, which is a subtle form of the food we eat. In a famous story in the Chandogya Upanishad, Uddalaka, the father, tells Shvetaketu, his son, go and fast for 14 days. To cut to the chase in that story, so he says, go and fast for 14 days and you will know what or how the mind is just inert. And so the son Shvetaketu was an expert in chanting of the Vedas. His memory was phenomenal, and he had an equal swagger in keeping with his knowledge. So he had that brash arrogance, perhaps, of youth, because he was such a bright student in his Gurukula. And so the father wants to bring down a notch or two the ego of his son. And he says, you don't seem to understand that the mind is just inert. It's not you. And he says, if you want to convince yourself and understand that you, the great Shvetaketu, who is such a fantastic mind, who has by-hearted all the Vedas and also knows the understanding of what they mean, go and fast for 14 days, drink lots of water, because if you don't, the body perishes. And so Shvetaketu was also possessed by a certain Shraddha in his father. He felt the father is indicating a truth about me that I don't know. And so he very diligently, dutifully follows the father Uddalaka's instructions and fasts without eating a morsel of food for those 14 days. And then after that, he comes back and the father says, chant the Vedas, chant the Purusha Sukta, or chant the Rudram. And Shvetaketu is barely able to recognize his father or the situation. Having fasted for so many days, the mind just doesn't work. He's unable to recollect anything of what he has learned. He's unable to recollect all the knowledge he has. None of it comes out. And then he recognizes even in that fasting state, aha, so all that I thought is mine, that knowledge of the Vedas, which is mine, was just a product of the food I ate. Now it's gone. I stopped eating the food. All the knowledge that I possess at the mental level is no longer available to me. He recognizes in that moment of insight, there is that epiphany he undergoes. And then the father says, now go and slowly start eating food. And the Upanishad goes on to say, like even a flame, when it is deprived of fuel, goes on diminishing in intensity. but it just doesn't go off as long as for a certain length of time, there is little fuel available in the body. Even so, if you stop eating for 14 odd days, the life force, the prana, will start slowing down and down and down until all that one regards as one's knowledge, one's memories, all of them become very fuzzy and unclear, unavailable, because the mind is no longer active there. It has become, as it were, like in a seed-like state, unavailable. That mind, which is a product of the food we eat, is as good as non-existent, barely existent. And then again, as we start slowly feeding it a little by little, not all at the same time, as many of you would know, one of the key rules how you break a fast, you can't just load yourself with food the very next day after a long fast. That's disaster. And so he is asked to eat a little by little, again over the next few days. And then after a week or so, he comes back and the father says, now chant the Vedas, and he's able to chant the Vedas. And he's very clear now. That part of what he regarded as I, which is just the mind, which is a product of food, will increase and reduce as you eat and don't eat. But there is I, which is the observer of all that is going on, which is the very witness of even the mind. So that discernment occurred very clearly to Shwetaketu. And so here too, Bhagavan goes on to say that I, which is ego-iti, arises, it appears superimposed on the nature of the self, which is like the heated iron ball. Very difficult to disambiguate or discern the I from the mind. In this case, the fasting did the trick, as it were. Many of us too could do well to experiment a little. Just fast for a few days, do a lemon honey fast if you like, and see how it plays on the mind. If you have the luxury of doing a lemon honey fast, nothing like it. 4 to 5 days of an excellent lemon honey fast. It's both a detox for the body and the mind. So there are these organizations which even facilitate that. Well, for those who are into Bhagavan's teachings, it will also give an extra benefit. You will see a little more clearly how you're not just the mind, how the mind plays about in the absence of prolonged absence of any food. It's a very useful experience. And so Bhagavan went on to say that ego-iti that is conjoined with the consciousness light is what is known as the witness. And then he goes on to say that the soul, which is here, that Jivatman, may be involved in so many experiences and undergo pleasures and pains, and yet the self-light that is in it does not change in the least thereby. And so we undergo various pleasures and pains, but that Atma Prakasha, the light of consciousness in us, the self-light as it is called in English here, does not change in the least thereby. If my shadow falls in the ditch, that doesn't touch me. That is the kind of epiphany which Bhagavan is giving here, that the mind and the body is like the shadow we have. It doesn't really affect us. It doesn't really matter even if they undergo lots of different experiences. So, of course, it's easy to say that statement, but that is our affirmation. That is our sadhana for us, to be able to see that I am really untouched, even if all these different experiences and pleasures and pains are undergone by us. The self-light does not change in the least thereby. And like the ether, says Bhagavan, it is all pervasive, pure knowledge that is one, and it shines in the heart as Brahman. So like the ether means Akasha. We can, in our understanding, take it as space. And that space is pure, Bhagavan says. It is pure knowledge. Why pure? Because space can allow many kinds of odors and many kinds of impurities to come and go but the space itself is unaffected, unafflicted by the different smells, pleasant or unpleasant, that come and go. So even so, I am untouched by what happens and comes and goes. No doubt the mind will record some of these residues, but for sure, this path of Bhagavan, of self-inquiry, of Dhyanam, helps us come back to base. It's like a bird flies all around, seeing different things, but it can keep coming back to the base. Even so, all that you are experiencing in your day or over the years, you can see that they do not touch you by giving yourself that little opportunity to pay attention to that which has not changed in you, that which has remained pure, quote unquote. The word pure, I say quote unquote because it's not to judge something as pure or impure, but to say that there is the truth about you which has not really been damaged in any way by whatever has occurred in the past. And so, like I said, as you discover this skill of coming back to just being oneself, be it even for half an hour, be it even for a little while, a few minutes, be it, that itself gives you that insight. Aha. So there's an ability in me to just relax and discover freedom and peace without doing anything, without any particular role. So that if you are able to summon up by your practice of self-inquiry or even mantra repetition, that's all what is being targeted here. So all these words are therefore with the aim of encouraging us to really give ourselves that half an hour, 1 hour a day, whereby you can come back to base. Even like I said, the bird flying around, it comes back to its nest. Again, it can fly around. Maybe that's the intermediate stage where you still have a certain prarabdha, certain karmas to work out, but you're never ungrounded. You're always having this capacity to just come back to base, remain grounded. That is what gives you the freedom and peace. So that either, which is the all-pervasive pure knowledge, that is one and it shines in the heart as Brahman. So Bhagavan is encouraging us with these words. And then the 17th question we will see today. How is one to know that in the heart, the self itself shines as Brahman? How is one to know that in the heart, the self itself shines as Brahman? So, and whenever a question is there, Bhagavan's great accomplishment or great capacity as a guru was, he would give an answer which is totally ad hominem, exactly what that questioner needs to know or understand. Sometimes the literal meaning of the question is something, and Bhagavan answers something that at first glance appears to be a little different from what you might fancy or you or I might fancy as the direct answer to the question. But he was able to see deeper into the very source of the question. And which is why here too, Bhagavan could see that that person feels that, okay, I am this awareness, but am I really infinite? Am I really without any limitation? Maybe I am small consciousness, and it's this small consciousness which is aware of this mind. So that is the vivaksha, the intended meaning of the questioner, as the answer will indicate here. So the questioner wants to know that the self which is in the heart, he recognizes or he accepts that idea after that point. But he's saying, how do we know that that shines as Brahman? In other words, it is Brahman alone, which is infinite, which is the cause of the universe and all that. How is that? How do I recognize or own up that that Brahman itself is here? And so Bhagavan goes on to answer, just as the elemental Akasha within the flame of a lamp is known to fill without any difference and without any limit, both the inside and the outside of the flame, so also the knowledge either, that is the Chidakasha here, that is within the self-light in the heart, fills without any difference and without any limit both the inside and the outside of that self-light. This is what is referred to as Brahman. So Bhagavan highlights that point, that this knowledge either that is within the self-light in the heart, meaning what you are able to own up and feel the very immediate experience to be. You experience that consciousness every moment. It is never away from you. It is never displaced. Consciousness that you are never displaced. Everything else keeps getting displaced, changed by one thing and another. But what is never displaced, never goes away, never comes in, that self-light is so far discernible by the student. But then Bhagavan says that fills without any difference and without any limit both the inside and outside of that self-light. In other words, the knowledge either that is within the self-light fills without any difference and any limit both the inside and the outside. So whatever knowledge you experience within yourself in the immediate moment is both inside and outside, says Bhagavan. So it's not just inside you. What you regard as inside you is notional. One very helpful way of appreciating this very idea, and then you can see the semantics here. So just try and do this exercise. So just close your eyes and think of any song or chant or melody just for a few seconds. So you can, if you're seeing this video, gently close your eyes and recollect any song, melody, or chant for a few seconds. Now, keeping your eyes closed, shift your attention to some sound coming from your environment, be it the noise of the very fan in your room, or the air around you swishing by. Any sound in your external environment, shift your attention to that. Now, once again, think of a song or any melody or a chant. Again, shift your attention to any sound coming from the outside. Did anything happen to awareness which was there when you were hearing that which is from outside? And then a song which you recollect in your mind, or a chant or a sound from your memory, you recollect it. The same awareness is there. Inside, outside, same consciousness. Doesn't go away, doesn't shift, doesn't change or move. Both inside and outside are within awareness. You can now open your eyes. So this kind of a recognition or a paying attention, you could customize it in your own way. Recognizing inside something, outside something are both within awareness. Awareness doesn't change a wee bit. It doesn't move. It doesn't go out or come in. It remains what it is, merely illuminating the inside so-called object or outside so-called object. So this notion of inside and outside is exactly that. It's notional, just a concept which we use for convenience. And so Bhagavan says that very fact, giving the example that if you have a flame of a candle or a lamp, so the akasha or the space is there both in the very flame of the lamp as well as outside the rest of the lamp. Notice how when there is a flame or a lamp kept in front of you, and then that lamp is radiating light going outwards from the lamp. So akasha or space pervades both the lamp as well as the rest of the space other than the flame of the lamp. So even so, Bhagavan says that consciousness is no doubt recognized in the heart, but it is there everywhere. So consciousness is merely owned up, recognized in the heart as the self, as I am, but it is that which is everywhere. It is never displaced, even when external objects are in the field of awareness. So here, that very truth of the consciousness which is never displaced is illustrated by Bhagavan saying, both the inside and outside of the flame are pervaded by that same akasha. So that is the analogy given to say that first you recognize the self in your heart, in the immediacy of your experience, but then all that is experienced as an object is understood as not independent of that awareness. It's not like the objects continue to be where they are, and then there is the self within you. No, that duality is resolved. And so this is a very important statement, which is sometimes not perhaps clearly noticed. That in saying that consciousness is not matter, it is not in the body, or I am not the body, people talk, I am not the body. It's a very profound idea, but it's also a bit unhelpful if one stops there. So Bhagavan says, I am not just the body. The difference between the ajnani and the jnani, or the person of knowledge and the person who still hasn't shed ignorance, who's technically called an ajnani, not to label him, but just a statement of fact. The difference is that the person with ignorance says, I am the body. Or he might say, I am in the body, another avatar of that very avidya. But the man of knowledge says, I am the body, but I am also outside the body. I am inside the body. I am all that exists. So nothing is rejected in the ultimate knowledge and understanding. All that was rejected, I am not the body, I am not the mind, all of that is again validated as not separate from that awareness. Which is why Advaita is a very holistic and a complete system. It doesn't lead to the mistake of what is known as subjective idealism, meaning I am one consciousness, there is another consciousness. That is one type of wrong, if you like, outlook, where there are many consciousnesses. So there is that kind of a thinking also sometimes. Not so. Consciousness is just one. There's no plural for consciousness. And then again, can we say that all that is outside, it continues to be there, and I separate myself from this world of matter? There were a great school of thought called the Sankhyas who would think like that. There are two entities, matter and consciousness. Not so, says Bhagavan. Because all that is called matter is not separate or not apart from consciousness. That is the last stage of jnanam. Only then the jnanam is complete. But the intermediate step is very important. The intermediate stage is what? I recognize I'm not the mind. I'm able to separate the mind from what I am. So I recognize the mind keeps changing. I am not the changing mind. So I recognize the witness. All that is very helpful and important, but that is not the final step of what is known as self-knowledge. Instead, all that has been rejected is again validated as not apart from consciousness. Sri Ramakrishna, the great Mahatma, used to say that this whole journey of spirituality is like climbing up to the roof of a building. So you climb up a staircase, reach the roof of the building. While climbing up, you keep rejecting. This step is not the highest. This step is not the highest. You're ascending. So you reject the earlier steps and then go up. And then when you reach the roof, aha, you recognize this is the roof. And then you validate all the rejected steps as being the same brick and mortar and cement which is there in the roof. So that roof which is having the cement and the mortar, that same reality was there in a different form, in a different upadhi as it's called, in all those steps you rejected. So ultimately, nothing is outright rejected as non-existent. Instead, we just say it has no existence separate from the self, which is why it is important to see this two-stage journey here. First, recognize your separation from all that is external, meaning recognize that you are separate from all that is external to you, including the mind and senses. Then you come back and say, all that is here is not separate from me. You don't actually try to condemn it. In that sense, you don't actually try to reject it actively. It is merely recognized as part of the play of awareness, being what it is. Because even rejection can imply hatred. Rejection can imply a certain dvesha, a certain denial. And so therefore, the completeness of jnana takes place when all that is rejected is also validated. It is also seen as part of the play of that very awareness, which is the truth which you arrived at in the first place. So that very thing Bhagavan says that the same self-light, the same knowledge is recognized to be without any difference and without any limit. It is both inside and outside of the self-light, which is first recognized in the heart. And then this very truth that you have this two-stage kind of journey, if you like, is highlighted with a very beautiful metaphor, which is Bhagavan's fairly well-known box, as it were, of self-inquiry, as I like to call it, where Bhagavan uses the three states and the three bodies and encapsulates this entire knowledge of Vedanta in one diagram, which maybe in the next class we will see it in a little detail. But today we will see the question which led Bhagavan to sketch this particular drawing. And the questioner here asks, this is question number 18 of the 40 questions. He says, how do the three states of experience, the three bodies, etc., which are imaginations, appear in the self-light, which is one impartite and self-luminous? And even if they should appear, how is one to know that the self alone remains ever unmoving? So it's a very large, big umbrella kind of question here. So the questioner says that what are these three states of experience? How do we know, how do these three states of experience, which are waking, dream, and deep sleep, the three corresponding bodies, which are the gross body, the subtle body, and the causal or karana sharira, which are all imaginations. So the questioner already has a certain background that these are all just concepts in the mind. Ultimately, when analyzed, they just fall away as convenient, useful, even necessary perhaps concepts to order one's experience. It's like how we might say the earth is a planet revolving around the sun rises in the east, and the earth is revolving around its axis. All these are just concepts, but they are useful. They are not to be dismissed as subjective imagination. You can call it a collective imagination of all of humanity. So they have a certain vyavaharika satta, as it's called. They are useful imaginations. But how do these three states of experience and subtle body, the three bodies, which are imaginations, appear in the self-light, which is one impartite and self-luminous? So the question is asking, if the self is one, how do all these different entities appear in that one impartite and self-luminous self? What is impartite? That which doesn't have partitions or borders. There is no inside and outside, as Bhagavan has explained. So in that impartite self, how do these different states and bodies appear? And then he goes on to ask the questioner, even if they should appear, how is one to know that the self alone remains ever moving? So he wants to know more about recognizing the self as non-changing, achalam. Unmoving means achalam. And Bhagavan there gives the example, which we will see in a little detail in the next class. But for today, we'll just see one very helpful idea here, where we can see why at all should we look at this whole concept of the three states. Why do we need to know all these details that we might ask? And I would suggest whenever you read anything which Bhagavan says, even for that matter, something which is very insightful and telling you something helpful for your sadhana, for your self-inquiry practice, try and relate whatever you read to something in your immediate experience, something that you can connect to what you are doing, if you like, in your practice and in your immediate understanding. Otherwise, it becomes a kind of concept, which is just one more concept added to your existing concepts. The difference here is this is also a concept, but it is reducing your existing concepts to less in number. So if I have many different ideas in my mind, the use of these type of questions about three states of experience, three bodies, and so on, is to reduce all of those concepts in your mind to just a few. Very helpful to then come back to that one. Think of it as how a woodcutter sometimes, not in all contexts, but sometimes chooses to trim the branches of the tree, causes less collateral damage perhaps. So they trim the branches of the tree, and then they might choose to chop the tree, which is necessary to do if that be the case. So similarly, a conventional mind has so many roles it plays, so many different things it is doing. It's not a mind that is 24 hours in self-inquiry. And so therefore, for that conventional mind, it is helpful to have this framework of avastha-traya, the three states of experience understanding. Then the sharira-traya, the three bodies. This kind of framework of understanding simplifies all the other concepts which one has. It's like how I might have different objects in my room, and I might just scatter them all around the room. Not very helpful sometimes to take them all at one place and get rid of them. So you might organize them. You might want to organize the different objects in your room into just two trays or two drawers, if you like, or two or three drawers. So similarly, these prakriyas or ideas are giving a certain framework, a shape to your many ideas in your mind, to the many things that you do. And if you're able to do that and apply it to your lived experience, very helpful. In one go, then that experience, if you like, or knowledge of the self is able to arise. So, which is why we shouldn't think, why do we need all these concepts? Why can't I just jump? Well, it doesn't quite work. Even if it does, again, all those questions tend to come up. So as long as I have a mind which is asking questions, very helpful to go with these frameworks of Bhagavan, of three bodies and three states of experience and so on. Like I said, they help you organize the existing chaos in one's mind into a certain pattern. Then we can take that leap into a Advaita. So in response, Bhagavan gives the example of the box, which we will cover in the next class. But the essential truth there is that one light of awareness within you is projected outwards and comes out as this world. So Bhagavan uses what is known as drishti srishti, which means we are not trying to take for granted this notion that there is a world out there and there is a creator and that creator has created the world. Nothing wrong with all of those ideas, but just trying to keep it extremely simple and say that I am in deep sleep. In deep sleep, I do not experience anything at all. Universal experience. Nobody can deny that. That in deep sleep, nothing is experienced. If at all we can say there was a blank, that's fine. Nakinchi davedisham, as we say in Sanskrit. There was a blank. I did not experience anything. And yet, I am quite at ease. I recognize upon waking, I slept well. That was a refreshing deep sleep. So you recognize that Sukham Maham Aswapsam, I slept happily. I did not know anything. These two words are the key, if you like, sutras for deep sleep. Whenever you think of deep sleep, in the context of the teachings of self-inquiry, remember these two sutras for what we call deep sleep. I did not know anything. I was happy. I was at ease with that state. I did not fear it. Nobody is afraid of falling asleep, but people might be afraid of a similar experience like death because they imagine death to be something. And so, if nothing is experienced, and you tell somebody, look, you're not going to experience anything at all, everything that belongs to you will be taken away from you, they might feel a little apprehensive. But exactly that is happening every day to each one of us. In deep sleep, everything is voluntarily relinquished. Everything is let gone of happily. We make so many arrangements to get that good nap in the afternoon if you have the luxury of a nap on a weekend, or to sleep at night. You might have a little comfortable bed or a little pillow which suits your sleeping style, and switch on the fan or the air con. And so all these arrangements are done so that you can relinquish all the roles you play. It's such a relief to let go of the roles you play. It's an important thing to recognize that these roles which we hold on in the waking state with such passion, that we take them to be defining us, we voluntarily, happily relinquish those roles and rest in oneself in this very magical experience of deep sleep, Sushupti. And so Bhagavan very often uses this prakriya of Sushupti to recognize or to draw the attention of the devotee to recognize that I can be happy without anything at all, nothing to fear. I have nothing to fear when things go away from me. I don't have to worry, oh my God, the sources of my happiness are being taken away from me. Not so. So it takes a lot of courage to own up that idea, but that is the very blunt and powerful truth that happiness does not critically depend on all these roles I am playing. And so Sushupti is the first most significant experience each one of us undergoes. So Bhagavan draws attention to that Sushupti or deep sleep experience where I'm not even dreaming. Everything is taken away from me by my own volition, or not volition, by my own voluntary acquiescence and that experience of deep sleep. So that's something very helpful to highlight to each one of us, that I can let go of things and still be at ease, especially when those things are going away from me. Nil desperandum. That's Bhagavan's instruction in so many contexts of using deep sleep itself as your sadhana focus, if you like, that I am happy just being myself, letting go of the roles I play, letting go of even the objects I call mine. I am still happy. That deep sleep experience is the first and most significant starting point. And then the second state of experience is the dream state, where I have this magical three-dimensional virtual reality show, as it were, projected from out of myself. Nothing apart from myself is there. There are no dream protons or dream electrons or quarks or dream quanta. And yet there is this world out there called the dream world. That's a very important magical experience given to us by Ishvara, by the cosmic intelligence, for teaching us that even when I experience duality, I am still non-dual. The experience of duality does not contradict non-duality. The experience of Dvaita does not contradict the truth of Advaita. Very important to recognize using the very dream experience, as we will discuss further in our next meeting, next session. I will stop here and continue next time. Thank you. I'll end with the Shanti Mantra. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Anuragji, kindly take over.
Namo Ramana sir. Thank you. Thank you so much for again a very deeply insightful session today, sir. I just checked YouTube channel. We do not have any questions on the channel right now. So once again, a very humble thank you, and we will switch over to Raman Kendra Delhi's shrine with Narayananji, and I shall now request him to initiate with Akshar Manamalai and Aarti. Sir, thank you so much for your guidance today. Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana.
கருணாருணமணி கிரிநாமலினிகள் கருமக்ஷரமண மகிழ்மாலை திருநாளிய சிறு அடியார் தெருமரல் தெளிய பரவுதல் பொருளாக கருணாகரமும் ரமணாரியன்முவ கையினால் சொல்லியது கதியாக அருணாச்சலம் என அகமே அறிவோடும் ஆழ்வார் சிவனது ஆழ்வாரே அருணாச்சலவரற்கேற்ற அக்ஷரமண மாலை சாற்ற கருணாகர கணபதியே கருமருளி காப்பாயே அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சலம் என அகமே நினைப்பவர் அகந்தை வேறறுப்பார் அருணாச்சலா அழகு சுந்தரம் போல் அகமும் நீயும் அபிநமாயிருப்போம் அருணாச்சலா அகமுகுந்தீர்க்கும் அககுகை சீரையாய் அமர்வித்தவென் கொல் அருணாச்சலா ஆருக்காயனை ஆண்டனை அகற்றி தினம் வழி தீடும் அருணாச்சலா திப்பழித்தம் உனை ஏனினைத்தாய் இனி யார் விடுவார் அருணாச்சலா ஈன்றிடும் மன்னையின் பெரிதருள் புரிவோம் இதுவோ உனதருள் அருணாச்சலா முனையே மாற்றி ஓடாதுள்ளத்தின் மேல் உறுதியாயிருப்பார் அருணாச்சலா ஊர் சுற்று ஊழம்பிடா உன்னை கண்டு அடங்கி உன்னழகை காட்டருணாச்சலா என்னை அழித்து என்னை களவாவிடில் இதுவோ ஆண்மை அருணாச்சலா. ஏன் இந்த உறக்கம் என்னை பிறருக்க இது உனக்கழகோ அருணாச்சலா. ஐம்புல கள்வர் அகத்தினில் புகும்போல் அகத்தில் நீலையோ அருணாச்சலா. ஒருவனாம் உன்னை ஒளித்தவர் வருவார் உன் தூதே இது அருணாச்சலா. ஓங்காரம் பொருள் உயர்வில்லை உன்னை யார் அறிவார் அருணாச்சலா. அவ்வை போல எனக்கும் அருளை தந்து என்னை ஆழ்வது உன் கடன் அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சலி 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 அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சலி 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 அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சலி அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சலி அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சலம் வாழி அன்பர்களும் வாழி அக்ஷரமண மாலை வாழி. ஓம் பூர்புவஸ்வ தஸ்ஸோதர்வவாணியம் भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात्. देवसहितप्रसवसत्यं निर्णयप्रतिज्ञान्यमृतं स्वाहा. ॐ प्राणाय स्वाहा, ॐ अपानाय स्वाहा, ॐ ज्ञानाय स्वाहा, ॐ दानाय स्वाहा, ॐ समानाय स्वाहा, ॐ ब्रह्मणे स्वाहा. ॐ नमो भगवती श्री अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः. नमो भगवती श्री अरुणाचल रमणाय नमः. नमो भगवती श्री अरुणाचल रमणाय नमः. श्री पार्वती नमः शिवाय नमः. नमः शिवाय. ओम शिवाय नमः. ओम शिवाय नमः. ओम शिवाय नमः. कदलीपழம் अन्नदान नैवेद्यं समर्पयामि. मध्ये मध्ये पानीयं समर्पयामि. उत्तराभूषणं समर्पयामि. नीराजनं समर्पयामि. नीराजनानन्तरम् आसमनीयं समर्पयामि. समायुक्तं नागवल्ली तलेवरं कर्पूर्णसूर्णसंयुक्तं प्रतिगृहीतां कर्पूरनीराजनं समर्पयामि. पुष्पं वेद पुष्पवान् प्रजावान् पशुमान् भवति चन्द्रमा पावान् पुष्पं पुष्पं पुष्पवान् प्रजावान् पशुमान् भवति ॐ तद्ब्रह्मा ॐ तद्वायु ॐ तदात्मा ॐ तत्सत्यम् ॐ तत्सर्वम् ॐ तत्पुरो नमः अन्धचरति भूतेश भुवायां विश्वमूर्तिषु त्वमेव तं वसत्कार तं इन्द्र तं रुद्र तं विष्णु तं ब्रह्म तं प्रजापति ॐ तथा ज्योतिर्समृतं ब्रह्मपुरुषो न कर्मणा न प्रजया बने नित्यानेके अमृतत्वमानसु परेण नाहं हितं भुवायं विप्राजते दत्यदयो विसन्धि वेदांत विज्ञान से नित्यदाता संन्यास योगातदय शुद्ध सत्वा ते ब्रह्मलोके तु परान्तकाले परामृतात् परिमुच्यन्ते सर्वे दारं विभावं परमेश्वरभूतं यत् पुण्डरीकं पुरमध्य सगुंसदं तत्रावित्तगरमगनं विलोकत् तस्मिन् यदन्तद्दत्वादित्यं यो वेदान्तोस्परं प्रोक्तो वेदान्तसत्यप्रतिष्ठितः तस्य प्रकृतिलीनस्य परतमहेश्वरः मन्त्रपुष्पं रमणमर्शिक्यं कार्तिकायनिर्वावळि देवानित्यं सुब्रह्मण्यं स्वामिनाथं दक्षिणामूर्ति नटराज भैरवा नन्दिवैश्वासुपार्वतीत्यं समर्पयामि ॐ सत्सर्वब्रह्मार्पणमस्तु हरि ओं हरि ओं हरि ओं
Namo Ramana. This brings us to a closure of today's satsang at Raman Kendra Delhi with Raghavji. We shall meet Raghavji again next month on 4th Sunday. Namo Ramana.